The arrival. The ice fields of Thalvora stretched endlessly beneath the transport shuttle, a frozen ocean of crystalline blue that seemed to breathe with its own cold light. Cale Mercer pressed his palm against the viewport, watching patterns shift in the ice below like living fractals. 3 months of preparation, 7 weeks of faster-than-light travel, and still nothing could have prepared him for the alien beauty of this world. "We descend in 5 minutes, Envoy Mercer," the pilot announced, her voice crackling through the cabin speakers. Cale straightened his formal Earth diplomatic coat, dark grey with silver threading that caught the light. His reflection stared back at him, brown hair slightly too long for regulation, grey eyes tired from jump sleep, jaw tight with nerves he wouldn't admit to anyone. The landing platform materialized from the ice itself, rising on pillars of compressed frost. As the shuttle touched down, Cale saw her, Ambassador Zyrith, her skin the pale blue of winter dawn, her eyes like chips of black ice. She wore robes that seemed woven from frozen starlight, and when she smiled, it was both welcoming and unsettling. "Envoy Mercer," she said as the airlock hissed open, "welcome to Thalvora. We have waited decades for this moment." Cale descended the ramp, the cold hitting him like a physical thing despite his thermal suit. "Ambassador Zyrith, I'm honored. Though I admit, your transmission mentioned treaty negotiations, not waiting." Zyrith's laugh was like wind chimes in a blizzard. "Come. General Savior will explain everything." They walked through corridors carved from living ice, walls embedded with lights that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Other Thalvorans passed them, tall, graceful beings with skin in shades of blue and silver, their movements fluid and deliberate. Cale felt distinctly human, clumsy, and warm in a world made of elegant cold. The Hall of Whispers rose before them, a structure of obsidian and frozen crystal that seemed to capture and reflect every light source nearby. 2 massive doors stood closed, their surface etched with symbols Cale couldn't read. A figure stood before them, General Savior, her military bearing unmistakable, her silver skin marked with ceremonial tattoos that glowed faintly blue. "You finally arrived, human," Savior said, her voice carrying an odd mixture of relief and anticipation. She placed one hand on the door. "Are you prepared for your destiny?" "I'm prepared to negotiate," Cale began. Savior pushed the doors open. The hall beyond stole Cale's breath. It stretched upward into darkness punctuated by floating lights that mimicked stars. But it wasn't the architecture that froze him in place. It was them. Dozens of Thalvoran women stood in a vast semicircle, each one unique and striking. Some wore flowing gowns of frost silk, others ceremonial armor that caught the light. Their eyes, violet, silver, deep blue, all turned toward him with an intensity that made his heart hammer. "What is this?" Cale whispered. "The selection," Zyrith said softly behind him. 40 women, 40 families, 40 hopes. The resonance prophecy spoke of a human whose genetic pattern could harmonize with our failing star. "We searched Earth's genetic database for months. You, Cale Mercer, are the only match." The quiet connection. The first week felt like drowning in attention. Everywhere Cale walked within the crystalline palace, candidates appeared, offering him samples of Thalvoran cuisine, demonstrating traditional dances, reciting poetry in their melodic language that his translator could barely keep pace with. Thessa, the warrior princess with skin like polished platinum and eyes sharp as blades, sparred in the courtyard each morning, her movements clearly designed to catch his eye. Lissa, daughter of the mining clans, brought him gifts of rare minerals that glowed in his palm. Even quiet ones like Feria would accidentally cross his path, blushing silver when he nodded politely. Cale felt like a prize rather than a person, and it exhausted him. On the 8th day, he escaped to the palace's upper levels, finding a narrow spiral staircase that led to an observatory tower he hadn't known existed. The door stood ajar, warm light spilling into the cold corridor. He pushed inside and stopped. She sat at a curved desk beneath a domed ceiling of pure crystal, the stars of Thalvora's system blazing overhead. Her hair fell like molten silver down her back, and she was so absorbed in her work, sketching star patterns on luminous paper, that she didn't notice him for a full minute. "I'm sorry," Cale said finally. "I didn't mean to intrude." She looked up, and her eyes caught him, soft grey with flecks of blue, holding none of the calculated interest he'd grown used to. "You're not intruding. This observatory belongs to everyone," she set down her stylus. Though most of the selection candidates prefer the social halls. You're part of the selection. Kale moved closer, studying the intricate maps spread across her desk. Narina. Astronomer. 4th tier. Yes, I'm technically part of it, she smiled slightly. Though I suspect my presence is more symbolic than serious. My family has no political power, no military strength. I'm here because the prophecy required representation from all regions, and someone had to come from the outer settlements. Kale pulled up a chair uninvited, fascinated by her casual dismissal of the entire elaborate process. You don't believe in the prophecy. I believe our star is dying, Narina said, turning back to her charts. I've tracked its energy decay for 3 years. The resonance is real. Something is causing harmonic distortion in the stellar core. Whether one human can fix it through some mystical genetic bond, she shrugged. I'm a scientist. I deal in measurable phenomena. Then why enter the selection at all? Something flickered across her face, vulnerability quickly hidden. My sister. She's 10, and she has stellar fever. It's killing her slowly, along with thousands of others. If the star stabilizes, the radiation patterns normalize, and stellar fever can be cured. She met his eyes directly. I don't care about being chosen. I care about my world surviving long enough for her to grow up. Kale felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with his thermal suit. Show me your work. Narina blinked. What? Your star maps. Teach me what you see. For the first time, genuine pleasure lit her features. She pulled her chair closer, and for the next 2 hours, Kale forgot about prophecies and politics. Narina explained stellar mechanics with such passion that the technical language became poetry. She showed him how Thalvora's 3 moons created tidal forces in the star itself, how the ancient Thalvorans had built their civilization around stellar cycles, how everything was connected. Their shoulders touched as they leaned over the same chart. Kale became acutely aware of her presence, the subtle scent of frost flowers in her hair, the way her voice softened when she spoke about the stars, the elegant movement of her fingers as she traced constellation patterns. You really love this, he said quietly. Narina looked at him, their faces suddenly close. The universe is vast and terrifying and beautiful. How could I not? Footsteps echoed on the stairs below, Ambassador Zyritha's voice calling for him. The spell broke. Narina pulled back, her expression closing off slightly. You should go, she said. The matriarch is hosting a formal dinner tonight. All candidates are expected to attend, and you're the guest of honor. Kale stood reluctantly. Will you be there? Back row, trying not to be noticed, she smiled. Good luck, Envoy Mercer. Kale. Just Kale. Good luck, just Kale. He was halfway down the stairs when he realized he was smiling for the first time since arriving on Thalvora. The formal dinner was exactly as excruciating as Kale had feared. The grand hall glittered with ice sculptures and floating light orbs, long tables arranged in a horseshoe shape with him positioned at the center of attention. Matriarch Vayana presided from a throne of compressed crystal, her ancient face unreadable, her ceremonial robes cascading like frozen waterfalls. Thessa sat to his right, her conversation sharp and political, discussing military alliances and resource agreements with the ease of someone raised in strategy rooms. To his left, Lissa spoke of mining operations and economic benefits. Other candidates circled throughout the evening, each interaction feeling like an audition. Kale found his gaze drifting to the back of the hall where Narina sat with a handful of lower-tier candidates. She wasn't watching him. Instead, she seemed deep in conversation with an older woman whose skin bore the blue-grey tint of the outer settlements. Narina laughed at something, her whole face transforming, and Kale felt that strange pull in his chest again. Envoy Mercer, Matriarch Vayana's voice cut through the ambient conversation like a blade through silk. Perhaps you would honor us with your observations thus far. Have any of our daughters caught your interest? The hall fell silent. 40 pairs of eyes fixed on him. Kale set down his glass carefully. Your world is remarkable. Your people are intelligent, accomplished, and clearly deeply invested in Thalvora's future. But... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not shopping for a strategic alliance. If this prophecy is real, if there's truly a connection to be made, it won't be based on political advantage or family prestige. It'll be based on something more fundamental. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Thessa's smile tightened. Vayana leaned forward slightly. And have you felt such a fundamental connection, envoy? Kale's eyes found Narina across the room. She was looking at him now, surprise evident on her face. I'm beginning to, he said quietly. The choice of the heart. The next 3 weeks blurred into a pattern Kale had never expected to crave. Mornings were spent fulfilling diplomatic obligations, meetings with various family representatives, tours of Thalvora cities, formal presentations about Earth-Thalvora cooperation. But every afternoon, Kale found his way to Narina's observatory. She never asked him to come. Never seemed to expect it. But she always made room for him at her desk, always had a new stellar phenomenon to explain. They talked about everything, his childhood in Earth's sprawling megacities, her upbringing in the quiet outer settlements where the ice sang at night. She taught him Thalvoran phrases that made her laugh when he butchered the pronunciation. He told her stories about Earth's oceans, a concept that fascinated her since Thalvora's water existed only as ice. One evening, as twin moons rose beyond the crystal dome, Narina showed him something new. Give me your hand, she said, an unusual hesitation in her voice. Kale extended his palm. She pressed hers against it, and suddenly he could see, actually see, faint threads of light dancing between their skin where they touched. Not the brilliant resonance everyone spoke of, but something subtle and real. Bioelectric compatibility, Narina whispered, her scientific tone betrayed by the wonder in her eyes. Our nervous systems are harmonizing. It's extremely rare between species. Kale's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Is this part of the prophecy? I don't know. The ancient texts are vague about what the resonance actually looks like before the full bonding. She didn't pull her hand away. Kale, you should know, the Council is pressuring Matriarch Vayana. Thessa's family controls 3 of the 5 military complexes. If you don't choose someone politically significant soon, they'll start making trouble. Questioning Earth's intentions, threatening to withdraw from Federation talks. Let them. You say that like it's simple. It is simple. Kale stood, pulling her up with him, their hands still connected. Narina, I've spent weeks being paraded around like some prophesied savior. Everyone wants to tell me what I should do, who I should choose, what's best for diplomatic relations. But when I'm here, with you, I feel like myself. Like I'm not a prophecy or a political tool. Just a person talking to another person who makes the universe make sense. Narina's breath caught. Kale. I know you didn't enter this to be chosen. I know you think there are better political options. But I don't want political options. I want. The door burst open. General Savior stood in the entrance, her expression urgent. Envoy Mercer, the matriarch demands your presence. Immediately. There's been a development. The Forbidden Union. The council chamber felt like a trap closing. Kale stood at the center of a circular room carved entirely from black ice, its walls reflecting distorted versions of the figures surrounding him. Matriarch Vayana sat elevated on her crystalline throne, her expression carved from stone. To her right, Thessa's father, Commander Vorak, stood with arms crossed over his armored chest, his skin darker blue than his daughter's, his eyes cold with calculation. 3 weeks, Vorak said, his voice echoing in the chamber. 3 weeks of diplomatic courtesy while the envoy wastes time with star charts and irrelevant candidates. Meanwhile, our star continues dying, and Earth receives none of the resource agreements we were promised. Kale kept his voice level. I was told this was about a prophecy, not a business transaction. The prophecy serves Thalvora, Vayana said quietly, but with unmistakable authority. Everything serves Thalvora. Envoy Mercer, the resonance must be tested formally. Tomorrow at dawn, you will participate in the bonding ceremony with Thessa Vorthalen. Her lineage is impeccable, her genetic markers show compatibility, and the political alliance. No. The single word dropped into silence like a stone into still water. Vorak's hand moved to the blade at his hip. You dare refuse the matriarch's wisdom? I refuse to be married off like cargo in a trade deal, Kale said, his heart hammering but his voice steady. The prophecy speaks of a heart-bound connection. You can't command that into existence. It happens or it doesn't. And you believe it has happened? Vayana leaned forward, her ancient eyes suddenly sharp with interest. With whom? Kale hesitated. Naming Narina would paint a target on her back. But denying her felt like betrayal. The decision was taken from him. The chamber doors opened and Narina walked in, flanked by Ambassador Zyrith. Narina's eyes widened when she saw the assembled council, but she didn't falter. Matriarch, I apologize for the intrusion, Zyrith said smoothly, but Narina Saildari has presented evidence that may be relevant to this discussion. Astronomical data suggesting the resonance may already be manifesting. What evidence? Vorak demanded. Narina moved to the center of the room, pulling a data tablet from her robes. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained clear. For the past 2 weeks, I've been tracking unusual stellar activity. Each afternoon, between the hours of third sun and seventh sun, Thalvora's star shows harmonic stabilization patterns. The timing corresponds exactly with, she glanced at Kale, with Envoy Mercer's visits to the observatory. When we are in proximity, the star responds. Murmurs rippled through the council. Vayana's expression sharpened with something Kale couldn't read. Proximity is not bonding, Vorak snapped. My daughter could produce the same effect with proper ceremony. Test it then, Kale interrupted, surprised by his own boldness. Right now. Bring Thessa here. Let her take my hand and see if the resonance appears. Thessa entered from a side chamber, clearly having been waiting nearby. She moved with warrior's grace, her expression unreadable. When she stood before Kale, she extended her hand without hesitation. Kale grasped it firmly. Nothing. No light, no warmth beyond normal body heat, no sensation of connection. They stood there for 30 seconds that felt like an hour. Thessa withdrew her hand, and for a brief moment, Kale saw something like relief flash across her face before her warrior's mask returned. The prophecy is unclear, she said formally, but without the anger he'd expected. Perhaps it requires ceremony. Perhaps it requires time. Or perhaps, Vayana said slowly, it requires truth, her gaze fixed on Narina. Child of the outer settlements. Approach. Narina walked forward, her chin lifted despite the fear Kale could see in the tightness around her eyes. She stopped beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Take his hand, Vayana commanded. Narina's fingers slid into Kale's palm, and the world exploded with light. It erupted from their joined hands like a supernova compressed into human scale, cascading waves of bioluminescent energy that pulsed through the chamber in ripples of silver and blue. The black ice walls caught and refracted it, turning the entire room into a kaleidoscope of living light. Kale felt it in his chest, his bones, his blood, a rightness that went deeper than thought, like two frequencies finally achieving perfect harmony. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Vorak stepped back, shielding his eyes from the brilliance. The light gradually faded, leaving after-images dancing in Kale's vision, but the connection remained, a warm thread linking him to Narina, undeniable and real. Vayana stood slowly, her ancient frame seeming to carry the weight of centuries. The prophecy is fulfilled, she said, but her tone carried warning rather than celebration. However, this complicates matters considerably. Complicates. Kale's hand tightened around Narina's. The resonance proved itself. What's complicated about that? Everything, Vorak said coldly. Do you understand what you've done? The outer settlements have no military, no economic power, no infrastructure to support the integration efforts. You've chosen sentiment over survival. I've chosen truth over politics. Truth won't feed our people when supply chains collapse. Truth won't defend our borders when neighboring systems see weakness. Vorak turned to Vayana. Matriarch, I formally invoke the right of challenge. The selection must be nullified. You cannot nullify a prophecy, Zyrith interjected. I can challenge its interpretation. Vorak's smile was sharp as fractured ice. Ancient law allows any family to contest a selection through the trial of separation. If the bond is truly fated, It will survive testing. If not, he shrugged. Then perhaps the human's feelings were merely infatuation, not resonance. Kale felt Narina's hand tremble in his. What trial? You will be separated, Vayana said, and now her tone carried genuine regret. Confined to opposite ends of the palace complex for 7 days. No communication, no contact. If the resonance is real, the star's stabilization will continue in your separation. If it fades. She didn't finish the sentence. And if we refuse, Kale demanded. Then Vorak's family will consider it an act of aggression against Thalvaran law. Military complications will follow. Earth's Federation membership will be jeopardized. Vayana's eyes softened slightly. I am sorry, Envoy Mercer. But you chose a path with consequences. Now we must see if your connection can bear them. Guards appeared at the doorways, not threatening, but present. Narina's fingers slipped from Kale's, and the loss felt physical. 7 days, she whispered, meeting his eyes with fierce determination despite the fear beneath. We can survive 7 days. We will survive, Kale said, loud enough for the council to hear. Because this isn't politics or prophecy. It's real. As guards led him toward the eastern wing and Narina toward the western towers, Kale looked back once. She stood framed in crystalline doorway, her silver hair catching the light, her expression a mixture of hope and terror that mirrored exactly what churned in his own chest. The trial had begun. 4 days felt like 4 years. Kale paced his assigned quarters, luxurious but clearly designed as a gilded cage. Guards stood outside his door at all times. He was brought meals, provided entertainment, even offered books and data tablets. Everything except what he wanted. Narina. He tried to measure his own feelings clinically. Was this really resonance, or had he just fallen for an intelligent, beautiful woman who treated him like a person rather than a prophecy? But every time doubt crept in, he felt that thread in his chest, faint but persistent, tugging toward the western towers like a compass pointing true north. On the 5th morning, Jorvan arrived. The rebel pilot was younger than Kale expected, skin a deep ocean blue, eyes bright with mischief, wearing civilian clothes rather than any military insignia. He slipped into Kale's quarters with the ease of someone who knew which guards could be bribed or distracted. You're the human everyone's fighting over, Jorvan said without preamble, dropping into a chair uninvited. Narina's friend. The one who's about to ruin my best friend's life unless you actually love her. Kale bristled. Who are you? Jorvan Saltes. Pilot, troublemaker, and Narina's closest friend since we were children in the settlements. She taught me navigation. I taught her how to hot W. The Star Reborn. The 7th night arrived cloaked in aurora storms, sheets of colored light rippling across Thalvora's sky like celestial curtains. Kale stood at his window, dressed in the dark, flexible clothing Jorvan had smuggled in, watching the moon's rise. His heart hammered a rhythm against his ribs. Almost time, almost time, almost time. A soft knock, 3 short, 2 long, and his door opened. Not Jorvan this time, but General Savior. Kale tensed, preparing for confrontation, but she raised a hand for silence. I'm not here to stop you, she said quietly. I'm here to help. Why would you? Because I watched that light erupt from your joined hands, and I've spent 30 years in service to Thalvora. I know the difference between political theater and genuine prophecy. She handed him a small device. Security override for the Western Tower. You'll have a 15-minute window when the guards change shift. After that, you're on your own. Kale took the device, suspicious of the gift. What does Vorak have on you that you'd risk this? Savior's smile was bitter. Vorak has nothing on me. But Vayana, the matriarch is old, Envoy Mercer. Older than most realize. She's been keeping our world alive through sheer will and ancient technology we barely understand. If the resonance is real, if you can stabilize the star, then maybe she can finally rest. Maybe we all can. She moved toward the door. The temple is in the crystalline canyons, 40 kilometers north. Jorvan knows the way. Complete the ceremony before dawn, or Vorak will have legal grounds to nullify everything. She left without waiting for thanks. 2 hours later, Kale dropped from his window onto a narrow ledge, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Below, a sleek transport pod hovered silently, Jorvan at the controls. Kale jumped, caught the pod's upper grip, and hauled himself aboard. "Western Tower, 5 minutes," Jorvan said, already accelerating. "Hold on to something. This is going to be illegal in about 6 different ways." They flew low and fast, weaving between ice spires and palace structures, the pod's engines barely whispering. The Western Tower rose ahead, a spiral of white crystal that glowed from within. Kale used Savior's override on the entrance, and suddenly he was running up stairs carved from compressed snow, his lungs burning from the thin atmosphere and exertion. Narina stood at her window, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, wearing dark traveling clothes that made her look like a shadow against the starlit glass. When she saw him, her face transformed, relief and joy and fear all at once. "You came," she breathed. "Did you really doubt it?" "Every minute of 5 days." They ran together, hands clasped, down the spiraling stairs. Jorvan had the pod hovering at the tower's base, its door open. They tumbled inside, and Jorvan punched the accelerator before the door even sealed. "Company incoming," he announced calmly, as if commenting on weather. "Vorak's personal guard, 3 transport units." They must have been monitoring more carefully than Savior thought. Kale looked back through the rear viewport. Sure enough, 3 larger pods were rising from the palace complex, their searchlights cutting through the aurora-filled sky. "Can you lose them?" Narina asked. "Lose them?" "No, these are military intercept craft, faster, better armed, piloted by people who actually have licenses," Jorvan grinned. "But can I fly through places they won't follow?" "Absolutely. Everybody hold on." He dove. The crystalline canyons opened beneath them like the jaws of some impossible beast, narrow passages between ice walls that rose hundreds of meters high, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the auroras until the entire world became kaleidoscope chaos. Jorvan flew like the canyons were part of him, banking through turns that pressed Kale and Narina against their restraints, skimming under ice bridges with centimeters to spare. Behind them, 2 of the 3 pursuit pods pulled up, unwilling to risk the dangerous passages. But one followed, its pilot either brave or desperate. "That's Commander Threx," Jorvan muttered, checking his rear display. "Vorak's best pilot. This is going to get interesting." A weapons alert shrieked. Energy bolts sizzled past their pod, close enough that Kale felt the heat through the hull. "They're shooting at us." Narina's voice rose with disbelief. "Warning shots," Jorvan said. "Threx is military, not an assassin. He's trying to force us down, not kill us." "Probably." He threw the pod into a spiral through a narrow corkscrew passage. "The temple's ahead, 3 kilometers. We just have to survive 3 more kilometers." The canyon widened into a vast chamber of ice and stone, and there it stood. The Star Temple. Ancient beyond measuring, its walls constructed from some material that wasn't quite crystal and wasn't quite metal, pulsing with faint internal light that matched the rhythm of the dying star overhead. Massive doors stood open, as if the temple itself had been waiting. Jorvan set the pod down hard. "Go. I'll deal with Threx." "Jorvan," Narina started. "I said go. That's an order from your best friend who's about to commit career suicide for your happiness. Move." Kale grabbed Narina's hand, and they ran. Behind them, Threx's pod was landing, armed guards emerging. Ahead, the temple doors beckoned. They crossed the threshold and the doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. Inside, the temple opened into a vast circular chamber, its walls covered in the same symbols Kale had seen on the Hall of Whispers doors. At the center, a pillar of light connected floor to ceiling, pure stellar energy contained by technology so advanced it seemed like magic. "The bonding point," Narina whispered. "We have to enter it together, join hands within the stellar stream. The resonance will either complete or—" She didn't finish. Pounding echoed on the sealed doors. Vorak's voice shouted commands outside, muffled but enraged. "Whatever happens," Kale said, turning to face Narina fully, "I need you to know this isn't about prophecy for me. It's not about saving your world, though I want to. It's not about diplomatic achievements or genetic destiny. It's about you." The way you see the universe, the way you make me see it. The way I feel more like myself with you than I ever have with anyone. Narina's eyes glistened. Kale, if this doesn't work, if the resonance fails. It won't fail, he pulled her closer. I don't know much about stellar mechanics or ancient prophecies, but I know what I feel. And I've felt it every moment since you showed me your first star chart. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate and full of hope. When they broke apart, her smile was tremulous but real. Together. Together. They walked hand in hand into the pillar of light. The stellar energy enveloped them like diving into a sun. Kale felt it surge through every cell of his body, burning, transforming, connecting. Narina's hand in his became the anchor point, the source, the completion of a circuit that had been waiting to close. Their bioelectric compatibility exploded into something far greater, a harmony that resonated not just between them but outward, upward, into the dying star itself. The temple filled with light, not the harsh white of their first touch, but cascading rainbows that pulsed in waves, each one carrying more energy than the last. Through his closed eyelids, Kale saw patterns that couldn't exist, understood equations he'd never studied, felt the mathematical poetry of stellar fusion singing through his bones. And he felt Narina, not just physically present but fundamentally connected, her thoughts brushing against his, her wonder and fear and overwhelming love flowing through the resonance like shared breath.